Welcome to this episode of Martial Truth, my interview with the author Thomas Feldmann, who's written two books. His most recent, Yabu, okay, the Untold Journey of an Okinawan Man, about Yabu Kentsu, one of the pioneers of Okinawan Karate, a very important figure. Book is outstanding. I mean, just all the historical stuff that's in here is just fantastic. I mean, you can see chock full of photos and just very detailed. The other book, Anko Itosu, The Man, the Master, the Myth. Again, I mean, you see the size of the book. I mean, very well researched. He took years for each book to really work on them. Excellent. Highly recommend them both. Take such a deep dive into what was going on in Okinawa during these times, and in Yabu's case, how he was a military man and fought in two wars, and it's fascinating reading. Okay, and he's really done a great job on his research and writing these two books, and I hope he continues to do many more. All right. As always, please, all right, click that like button, share. Been having some difficulties with Facebook, so if you've seen I haven't been sharing as many of my videos on Facebook, it's because Facebook is just a problem sometimes. There's no other way to get around it. It's a problem, okay? So if you see my videos, if you like it, please share it. Share them around, all right? It helps a lot. We're almost at 14,500 subscribers, on our way to 15,000. And we're just going to keep going, all right? So whether Facebook tries to, give us difficulties, we're going to overcome it and just keep going with the channel, all right? Again, appreciate all your support, all right? I really hope you enjoy this interview. Tom's a great guy. He comes across very well, a lot of fun, doesn't take himself too serious, all right? So please enjoy my interview with Thomas Feldmann.
Hi, nice meeting you. Can I call you Mike?
Of course.
Hi, Mike.
How are you?
Good morning. Good
Yeah,
morning.
it's morning. It's 7 a.m. here in Arizona.
And you remember the old authors like Richard Kim and everybody else also always said, yeah, karate was a kind of developed by the farmers.
Yeah.
Yeah, the romanticized version of Okinawan karate history, right? It was the farmers, they developed the tools and the
Well,
karate. And I said to me, come on, I was standing there for 1 hour. Yeah,
right,
and I'm working in the service industry, yeah, as an
right.
advisor, corporate advisor. And imagine, yeah, they get up early in the morning on the fields doing field work, yeah, and coming back with a sore back, yeah, sweating, and then they went back to their friends and developed the highly sophisticated martial arts. Come on.
Well, it's
No
funny
way.
because we had the same thing, in Ishinru with some of the history related to Tatsuo. One of the first generation students wrote a book. Steve Armstrong wrote a book on the
Okay, okay.
history of Ishinru, and when I read it, I was probably 19, 20 years old. I was training about 5 years, and it reads like a James Bond book, like meaning like everything's made up. There's nothing in it that's real. But I'm reading it, I'm like, oh my God, this book is unbelievable. But
Yeah.
it's just funny. And he wasn't claiming that everything that he was writing was correct, but like, yeah, like even The Weaponless Warriors by Richard Kim. I mean, look, I love that book. I love it. I recommend it. I think it's fantastic. But okay, right. You have to kind of take it for what it is, which is it's oral legends. And frankly, some stuff probably outright made up, right? To please an audience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a marketing genius to
Right.
write like that, and I think they got us with that. Yeah, they got you,
100%.
they got me.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. I
I'm
think
fit. I'm 15 years old studying Ishinru, right? And the founder studied with Kion, he studied with Motobu, he studied with Miyagi, and all three of those guys have chapters in Weaponless Warriors. And I'm reading it as a 15-year-old, and I'm like, oh my guys, these guys are like superheroes. They're literally like superheroes, right? So in one respect, it did have a big influence because it got me excited. It got me more excited about wanting to train and wanted to, to work on karate and figure it out. But, like I've told Andreas and Joe Swift and a bunch of other guys, now that I'm a little older, I want to know what the real history was. I don't want to just, again, we can, talk about the legends and stuff because I think that has a place too. But it's important to know the real history. And so what made you decide to go down this path of writing these serious biographies of some of the early pioneers of Okinawan karate? What made you decide to just do this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I go back when I started karate. Okay, I started karate with age of 15. Yeah,
Okay.
sports
Famously.
karate.
Right.
Yeah, you saw the movies,
Right.
Karate Kid, but I was not into Karate Kid that much. Yeah, my favorite movie was No Retreat, No Surrender.
Okay.
You
Right.
you you
Yeah,
know
I
that
know it.
one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
ghost of Bruce Lee
Yeah.
comes
Yeah.
back and
Yeah.
trains this young kid. Yeah, little anecdote. The main actor of this movie came to Düsseldorf, my hometown,
Okay.
last year to give a screening of his movie. Yeah, fan community is very
Okay.
strong here, and I visited the screening, and I was happy to have gotten the chance to meet him.
Okay.
A high buy. So I started 15 years of age, looking the kind of movies, started in Shotokan Karate. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I always wanted to start a martial arts, and there was a Shotokan dojo. I started training there for a couple of years, and I eventually became a member of the kata state team. Yeah, not the federal team. Yeah,
Right.
but the state of North Rhine-Westphalia here, kata state team, junior. Um, uh, what is it? Junior team, and I competed in several kata tournaments, and yeah, then I my legs wouldn't let me continue my training. It was hurting all the time, and I
Okay.
decided just before I started university, I guess, to stop training. And I just focused on my university studies, and I studied East Asian studies
Okay.
because I was a fan of Asia,
Right.
Japan, obviously, and my focus was Japan. And I studied human geography, culture, economy, language for a couple of years, and yeah, never worked in my job. Yeah, worked as a headhunter, now as a PR consultant, and then I followed all the books, articles, what others wrote about karate, martial arts. When I take a look behind me, it's my library, and at a certain point of time, I thought, yeah, I have to use my knowledge, my studies somehow. Yeah, I studied the practical aspect of karate, and what about the theoretical part of karate?
Right.
So yeah, I started to buy more books, yeah, read them, and yeah, uh, saw that much of it was based on legend, as you said.
Right.
Yeah, myth and legend, and not very scientifically based. So yeah, uh, I decided to yeah, do some of my own research, and finally started writing articles. And yes, that was a way how I became kind of a historical researcher for martial arts, karate in particular. Right.
Okay. So let me show these. So here's Anko Itosu, the man, the master, the myth, and Yabu, the untold journey of an Okinawan man. Okay, both written by Thomas Feldman. Both excellent. Read them both. The Itosu book. Obviously I read first. So I've got to tell you, one of the things I really liked about it is besides the, historical karate information, the political and the environment that was going on that was kind of forcing some changes within karate, right? Um, and again, forced changes with these karate masters that maybe were members of an aristocratic class, and now Japan says no more. We're going modern, and now these guys are kind of put into a position where they have to earn a living, where maybe before they didn't, and they're still trying to keep karate going, you know. So for me, like with Itosu, I have kind of mixed feelings with Itosu, right? Because he brought it into the school system, which probably saved it, meaning like if he hadn't, karate might have just disappeared, right? But also like for a guy like me, I think in certain aspects, it kind of watered it down a little bit where it wasn't the original intent, which was pure for self-defense, and now went in a direction where, well, okay, we're not gonna teach kids these techniques, and we're not gonna do this, and we're not gonna do that. And I think they probably tried to preserve it when they were teaching certain people, certain students. But I just find it interesting everything that was going on, and the push to get it into the school system, the push to figure out how to make it a sport, which I think karate is still struggling with. I mean, I think it's over 100 years. I think it still hasn't really figured out how to make it a sport. I know Europe, it's more organized there. In the United States, it's not organized enough. Now, I don't do sport karate, so for me, it doesn't matter. But I have a student in Europe that's big in sport karate. And he brings me in for seminars, but when I come in, I do all self-defense, right? I don't do sport fighting. And but again, those tournaments are more organized, everything's good. But I see here in the States, it's kind of all over the place. And so what drew you to Itosu first? Why was he the first guy you decided to tackle?
Yeah, right. Why Itosu? Uh, it was in 2021 when I published Itosu. I researched for a couple of years, I think 3 years. So I started around 18, 19 to research Itosu. And it was a time when I saw, especially in the groups on Facebook, so many publications translated into English about Itosu Anko.
Right.
Yeah, the Itosu Buyu then from the Yokushimpo, for example, and then I thought for me, there's actually no biography about a Japanese Okinawan Karate master. There's nothing. Yeah, you
Nothing.
have a biography, judo founder, Kano
Right.
Jigoro, I think Aikido and other martial
100%.
arts. You have
Right.
biographies. There's none. So I thought there must be someone should do a biography about Itosu Anko and the other guys. Yeah, not only a profile article, a short
Right.
article, but a
Right.
book, Cradle
Right.
to Grave. Yeah,
Right.
not a karate book, but look into his life. And I think there was no one at the moment to think about it, to write a biography about Itosu Anko. So I decided, I tell you later about Jill Swift.
But so
I,
so what's funny
yeah,
is
yeah,
like a guy like me, right? Like I say all the time, I'm an armchair historian. Like I
yeah,
I I'm like I'm glad there's guys like you around, Joe Swift, Pat McCarthy,
yeah,
because I
yeah.
get to benefit from the research and the work you guys do, right? But I
Oh,
gotta say, like as an outsider looking in, like I look at Anko Itosu and I say to myself, this must have been incredibly difficult because again,
yeah, yeah,
there's no contemporaries live, right? Where the search for documents, the search for articles, the search for even to find someone who trained with someone who
yeah, yeah,
trained with
yeah,
Itosu.
yeah, yeah.
It's,
So for
you
me,
know,
yeah, right.
go
For
ahead.
me, I decided I do a biography of Itosu Anko, but only for just for me. Maybe I publish it.
Right.
I wasn't sure about that, and I started researching. I started with my books I already had, then ordered some new books, articles, and um, at a certain point of time, I thought that that is not enough. Just copy and paste it not enough. Yeah. As a researcher, studied East Asian scientist as I am, yeah, that is not enough. So I have to go to Okinawa, research on site, doing field research. So in the course of preparing everything, after a couple of months, I learned about Joe Swift writing a book about Itosu Anko. And I said to me, what? Yeah,
Right.
we have 40, 50, 60, 70 years, nobody was interested in writing a
Right.
book about Itosu Anko. And when I started, yeah, Joe is already on it. Yeah,
Right.
so I stopped researching for a couple of
Okay.
time. I told Joe, we talked and laughed about it, and I waited for his book to be published. And when it was published, I ordered it, I read it, and I was relieved because
Right.
Joe took an different approach, yeah, to the life of Itosu Anko.
So I said to Joe when I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago, I said, I read your book first and then I read Joe's. And I said, unless some type of document miraculously appears, some type of written work that we didn't know existed related to Itosu. I mean, I think you guys between both books have, covered pretty much everything. And they are different. The books are both different. I mean, I think they're both really good to read. I was glad I read them back to back because it gave me an opportunity to compare the two of them. And like I said, I think they're both really good. I recommend them both, but they are different. They're different books, which I think is good. But
Yeah,
yeah, I would find that kind of funny if I'm in the middle of research and I find out that another researcher is writing a book on the same subject.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and one of the best, by the way. Yeah,
Right,
so I
right,
had to
yeah.
compete with.
Right,
Uh, but in the end, yeah, I restarted researching, and I in the course of the research, I think I met Joe in Tokyo, and we talked a couple of hours. And yeah, then my book was published. And as you said, it was really difficult to put together such a book, yeah,
right,
because you have limited amount of resources, yeah, and much of the resources you have, um, um, you are not sure if you can use them
right,
because no quotation, no references, who had said it when, yeah, it's a mystery, is it myth, is it a legend, or is it truth, yeah, and that's why I came up with the title, yeah,
right.
for the book. And I just in the beginning, I decided I have um, to take a look at the historical background, yeah, of Okinawa, where Itosu Anko lived. Yeah, not only take a look at his life because the sources are limited,
Right.
but I have to check the history and the people around him. So take out of it, draw conclusions from that to finally discover more about Itosu Anko's life. Yeah, so that is why you find much information about Okinawan history, much more than in the next book.
Right.
Right.
But to me that's important, right? I mean, it's one of the areas in karate that's been overlooked. I mean, like I was joking with Joe Swift about a couple of things that sometimes no matter what people say, like you show something with sources and you interview family, you do different things, right? But there's still people that'll hold on to the old legends or the old things that we were told when we were kids, right? Um, and this is why I think, like, like we talked about in the beginning about the fact that karate was created by farmers, which again, you think about it now, it's just utterly ridiculous. I mean, I live in a state where there's a lot of farming. Like people don't understand, like even though Arizona's a desert, there's a lot of farming here, right? And these people are working. I mean, they're working all the time. I mean, these farmers, and my daughter went to school in Oklahoma. That's a big farming state. I mean, these people are out there early in the morning, crack of dawn, working all day, and again, they have time then to, create this martial art, right? And so you look at it now, you realize it never made sense, right? But to see the way this came about and to see how it was more connected to the Ryukyu kingdom and the people that were in, say, the military there, or the aristocrats that had the money that could afford to train, or if they were traveling to China as emissaries and train there and bring it back. Um, it just shows you that karate is this kind of it's a composite art. You know, it's not just kicking and punching. It's not just grappling. Um, there are weapons. You see the sai and the bow have been around a long time. I mean, the sai is, it's not a farming tool. It was created as a weapon, right? Like I had an instructor tell me one time that I asked when I was a kid, I said, well, the sai is a farming tool. Like, what did they use that for? And he told me, well, they tie it to a bow and spear fish with it, right? And I kind of looked at him even as a young guy, and I was thinking to myself, boy, that'd be a pretty heavy spear. Like I'm supposed to spear these fish with this heavy sai, and it's not that pointy. How's it going through the fish? So, just some of these things that came about, and to see in a well-researched book all these different kinds of things that were going on in Okinawa, that were having an effect on karate, having an effect on people like Itosu. Um, it's fascinating, and it's very clear in the book, um, what was going on and how it affected these guys. And I mean, none of them were rich, especially once they abolished the kingdom
Right.
system, right? And now these guys, like you look at Keon, he was starting to supposedly drive a cart, right? Because like us, we have to make ends meet, right? You have a family, I have a family, right? And we think of these karate masters as guys that are sitting around and all they're doing is doing karate all day, and everything's good, like their life is great. You know, oh yeah, money's not a problem, but you realize that some of them had it very rough, and they had to make tremendous adjustments in their lives just to be able to provide for their families and themselves, and still kept
Yeah.
karate alive,
Yeah.
which
Absolutely.
I think a lot of guys just don't realize that and don't appreciate the sacrifices that these early guys made, to keep it going. That's why I say with my love-hate relationship with Itosu, right, is because I can't really hate him because he preserved it. If he hadn't found a way to preserve it, we're not talking about this. It's a
Yeah.
dead art.
Yeah.
It's something that's
Yeah.
just mentioned in history.
Absolutely. Itosu is a good example for poor karateka, yeah,
Yeah,
in later life, and thanks to the Yuki Shimpo, yeah, we know about his last years.
right.
And I wrote an article for Bugeisha magazine, yeah, just looking at his last couple of years, and it was really tough. Yeah, he couldn't afford a meal a day or so, and housing was difficult. And lucky Itosu, he had all his students around him, and they helped him financially and with food and everything else. Uh, must have been a really hard life for him.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, and thanks to him, yeah, I would say not only to him, but mainly because of him, we still are talking about karate, I guess. Yeah, um, and he was the most senior karate personality back then. And yeah, when they wanted to introduce karate to school and preserve it, they had to go to Itosu Anko. He was one of the leading karate practitioners around them, very well educated, intellectual, and he was the one to go. Yeah, and I think there were a couple of people who discussed introducing or trying to introduce karate into school. Yeah, and it was Hanashiro Shomo and the school heads and some other officials, and who was a guy to ask? It was Itosu Anko,
Right.
for sure.
Well, that raises another interesting point, right? Which is a lot of people have this idea that these early karate masters were kind of thugs. Like meaning they're out there fighting and they're beating people up and they're doing this and they're doing that. And when you really look at these guys are smart guys. Many of them were educated. You look at Itosu, some of the things he wrote, his precepts, right? Um, you just look at them and you realize, these guys, there was a lot more to these guys than just the karate, than just the fighting. They're deep thinkers. Most of them seem to have had a pretty strong moral code and you're always going to have those questionable guys, right? You just always, that's no matter what, right? But again, I think this is another aspect that's overlooked about just how developed these early guys were as human beings, as people. Like they're pretty serious guys, pretty seriously educated. And you look at a bunch of them and you see it. I mean, you look at some of their writings that have come down through to us, and you say, wow, these guys are they're pretty impressive, And they're not just guys out there breaking boards and engaging in fights with people. They're deep thinkers.
Absolutely, yeah, from a certain point of view, but they were human beings,
Oh yeah.
as we are, and they were not always the good guys.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Think about all the stories, Red Light District in,
All right.
in
Right.
2G and the fights in their youth. So, but that's one issue when you deal with this historical karate practitioners. You can only speculate. Yeah, you have limited amount of resources and
Right.
all the stories around them, and you don't know for sure. That's
Right.
always an issue with Itosu. When you take a look at Matsumura, it becomes even more difficult,
Right.
right?
Right.
And for Yabu, later on, yeah, we have more sources. Yeah,
Right.
we have even a family
Family
who,
still
yeah,
family members
still
alive, willing to
around.
talk
Yeah,
about them. Right. Right.
absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's what so now you did Itosu. What made you pick Yabu second?
Yeah, after Itosu Anko, 3 years of writing and then promoting, marketing the book,
Right.
yeah, I was done. Yeah,
Yeah, I hear you.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, I didn't want to do another book. It was tough. Yeah, as I
Right.
wrote in the foreword of my or the introduction of my Yabu book, right?
Right. Right.
Uh, so no more book at the moment. But then uh, I found so many sources I haven't used for the Itosu book because it didn't fit into the story and was
Right.
not about Itosu but about Yabu and others. I met so many people, like-minded people like you, Patrick McCarthy, Joe Swift, and others. And I was in contact with the Yabu family for the Itosu book.
Okay.
And I learned about a couple of publications. They just were written for the family, yeah, not for sale, but for
Right.
the family. And I thought we have to preserve the story
Right.
about Yabu Kentsu somehow.
Right.
Yeah, again the same. a story like with the Itosu book. Someone has to do it, right?
Right,
And
right.
yeah, and I looked at the list, and there was only one name on the list, and I decided, okay, let's do it. Yeah, no stress. Yeah, take your time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I decided to start with Yabu Kentsu, and it was the name was is Homa Yasui. Homa Yasui. He was married to one of Yabu's granddaughters
Okay.
in California. Uh, and I exchanged a lot with him about Itosu Anko. He read my book, and he shared so much information about Yabu's family. And I asked him, "What do you think?" I'm considering writing a book about Yabu Kentsu, and he was all in. He said, "Yeah, just do it."
Well, the first person I interviewed on the channel, right, was McCarthy Sensei, right? Because he'd
Okay.
come out with the book on Keon. And I know Pat McCarthy a long time. So
Mm.
um I had said to him, I said, hey, when you come out with the book on Keon, why don't you come on the podcast? I'll interview you, we'll promote the book. And he's like, great. And he came on and I tell the story. I walk out from my living room and I say to my wife, I hope he gives me an hour. I hope he gives me an hour. And Pat spoke for over 3 hours. So 3 hours interview, right? And during the interview, I asked him, I said, so what's next? Like, what's your plan? Do you have a book? What are you planning on doing next? Um, he says, well, I want to update some of my other books. And I said, you know what I'd like? I'd like somebody to do something on Yabu Kentsu. And that's what I said to him. And then he looks at me and goes, no, no, no. He goes, that's being done. And I said, what are you talking about? And he says, no, Thomas Feldman. Do you know Thomas Feldman? I says, no, I don't know Thomas Feldman. I never met him. He goes, no, he's writing, he just wrote an unbelievable biography of Itosu. And I was like, oh, okay. So I said, all right, well, I got to buy that, right? And then he said he's doing a deep dive into Yabu Kentsu. And I'm like, oh, great. I said, well, I got to see about maybe getting him on the podcast too. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm sure he'd come on, right? So for me, I mean, I always was fascinated with Yabu because of the fact that he was also a military guy.
Mm.
So he's a karate guy who also joins the military and actually sees action in combat, right? And then comes back and still continues to practice karate, right? Um, so, like I said to some people might look at him and say, well, he was a militarist or he was part of the whole Japanese going more, militaristic. And I just say to myself, well, listen, this is the way it was. Like, if you're going to worry about things that happened 100 years ago in the way it was, you need to get over it, right? It's in the past, but it's important we understand it and we know. So I found it interesting that again, he was also looking to push the karate uh, as a training method, as a training method to make Okinawan boys strong, that they could be recognized as good soldiers, as good as the Japanese mainland soldiers, which is, I understand that for Okinawans because I live in both those worlds, right? So I live in the Japanese Koru world, the
Mm.
ancient arts of Japan, and I live in the Okinawan karate world, right? And there's no question that there is a bias against karate with a lot of the Koru people. The funny thing is the bias now more is with Japanese karate. The Koru people say, "Oh, Japanese karate." That's not like the Koru people in Japan, when they hear I do Okinawan karate, they call it Koru karate. So they say, "Oh, you do Koru karate." So it's interesting they have a difference, right? But I could understand where Kentsu decided that I'm going to show the Japanese that an Okinawan man can be as good a soldier as any
Mm.
Japanese man. And I can admire the guy for that. Basically saying, "Oh yeah, you think we're inferior? Well, I'm going to show you we're not inferior." And the fact that he saw combat and the fact that he was, issued medals for valor, right, in combat, says something about him, says something about him as a guy, So in terms of that, I have a lot of respect for him and what he wanted to accomplish. Um, and again, I totally get that feeling of, well, you look at us as we're country bumpkins, right? And meanwhile, we can be as good a soldier as any mainland Japanese. So I thought that was an interesting aspect of Yabu's character. And it says something for him as an individual, you know. So
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. And I think much more than Itosu, he was a guy to transform Okinawan Karate. Yeah, Itosu maybe had some ideas and supported introduction of karate into schools. But with Hanashiro Shomo first taking the lead, training the youth, the school kids, and then later when Yabu Kentsu came back from the Second War, he participated in. He was a guy to transform it. Yeah,
right,
until the day when he left for California, yeah, where he lived for a couple of years,
right,
a kind of black box in his life story. But when
right,
he came back, he was very actively participating in transforming karate more into a fighting art. Yeah, not only kata like maybe Itosu Anko and Funakoshi
right.
were pushing it. Yeah, but Yabu was a fighter. Yeah, you can see it in the pictures that has been passed down from the 30s, for example.
Right.
And yeah, very very interesting. Well,
And,
what by the way, what you liked most in the of the Yabu book? My
well, again, I like the whole book, obviously, right? I do like the aspect, some of the military things in terms of
okay.
talking about that. Um, I also found very interesting the family dynamic.
Mm, yeah,
Which again, we all have families, we all have people within our families, maybe we have a falling out with, so it's interesting. Again, I think it's good to see these guys as humans.
yeah.
Like even myself, like I tell the story where one of my most senior karate students, as a woman, time she says to me, what we do is very important. And I literally looked at her and I said, well, it's important to us. It's important. We put on these funny uniforms, we tie these belts around our waists, and we go down and we throw kicks and punches and we throw people around, several days a week because we like it and it's important to us. But most people in the world look at what we do and think, why are we wasting our time doing that? Right? They don't think it's serious. They don't, we like it. We take it serious, right? So I try to be careful about not allowing myself to be put on a pedestal. Um, you know, I'm human like everybody else. I'm no different than anybody else, right? And I think it's interesting. That's one of the interesting aspects of the Yabu book because you could interview family. It's just interesting to hear and read about some of those dynamics. And again, he's got this goal of doing something with karate, right? Which, again, is an important goal because it preserves it, right? But, he's got family. There's some problems there with some family members. There's some things with family he doesn't agree with. He goes to California to reconnect with his son, right? So it's a fascinating and it's an interesting aspect of his character, right? Where again, initially maybe he's kind of down on his son for not following in the footsteps maybe of joining the military and going in that direction, right? And then maybe as he gets a little older, he takes a step back and realizes, okay, life is short and I've got to go see my son and let me go spend time with my son and maybe try to repair whatever damage is there, right? And he winds up spending several years there, which is nice to see, right? But again, it shows a human side. And often with these famous karate masters, we're not thinking about the human side at all.
Exactly,
We're
exactly,
only thinking about the martial side and they're kicking and punching and they're grappling and whatever, right? The stories of
exactly.
them fighting, right? Um, so I think like I said to Andreas and I said to Joe and everybody else, I want the warts and all. Like in McCarthy's Keon book, there's the story about the brothel incident with Keon and all this. And again, um, I wasn't there. I'm not going to judge because I don't know what that situation was at that time, right? I think people are very quick to judge certain guys when they hear about certain, like I'll give you, for instance, the founder of Ishinru, Tatsuo Shimabuku, right? If you listen to one first generation guy, they tell a story where a guy tried to stab him with a knife in the Philippines, and Tatsuo killed him with one strike. And then you ask Tatsuo's younger son said that he didn't kill him, he just knocked him out with one strike, right? Um, so again, you don't know what to believe, right? And some people might say, well, oh my God, he killed him, right? If he killed the guy, he killed the guy. Okay, but he was coming at him with a knife, right? So the thing is, I think it's a little tough to judge people when you don't necessarily have all the pieces. And then a lot of times we're focusing in karate, we're only focusing on karate. We're not
Right.
focusing
Yeah.
on, the other aspects of these people's lives, which I think gives you more insight into the karate. Like it doesn't give you less insight, it gives you more insight to the karate.
That was my idea. Yeah, you
Yeah,
have to look at the human being.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's why I didn't write the book for only the karate community.
right,
Yeah, but I hope others will also read the book and like it. Yeah,
right,
so that's why I described several karate words, yeah, or concepts, yeah, for the non-karate community. Yeah, you
right,
know it, other karate guys know it, but
right.
I describe it a little bit more in detail so that others can understand. Yeah, and when you want to learn more about their decisions, the historical development of karate, yeah, first take a look at the guys who were involved
Right.
in the development of karate. Yeah, so Itosu Anko first, then Yabu Kentsu, and I think both of them were responsible to transform karate. So you have to look at them. And the other aspect is um, to look at karate. It's always difficult. Yeah, at what it depends on at what point of time you look at karate. Yeah,
Right.
Itosu Anko's karate from the 18, let's say 60s and 70s is not Itosu Anko's karate in the beginning of the 20th century,
No,
like 1905,
no.
yeah, before we introduced it to the schools, yeah, with the help of others. So you have Funakoshi Kichin, Motobu Choki, they learned kata from Itosu Anko in the 80s,
Right.
1880s, maybe, for example,
Right.
yeah. And then you have Chibana Choshin, who learned kata in 1992, 93, or
Right.
Babuni Kenba. Yeah,
Right.
that's could be a different kata.
Right.
Yeah, why is
Right.
it? Yeah, because Itosu Anko gets older. Yeah, have new ideas implemented into his kata, or even couldn't do the kata the same way he done it when he was younger. Right?
Well,
Yeah.
I'll use Ishinru and Tatsuo Shimabuku as an example. So I've trained with many of the first generation students that trained with Tatsuo in Okinawa.
Mm,
So one guy does a kata and he doesn't move a certain way, right?
yeah.
And he
Yeah.
says that's the way Tatsuo showed me. And then another first generation guy does that move completely different. And then you say, okay, well, when were you there? And the guy was there. He was one of the early guys. He's there in the late 50s. And then another guy's there in the mid 60s.
Right.
And Tatsuo was tinkering. And he might show one guy a kata one way and show someone else something different. And then same thing. As he got older, there's a possibility some of the things changed. So
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
and this is in the 1950s and 60s. You're talking about mid 1800s,
Mm.
then early 1900s, right? So yeah, I think it's natural that these guys change. That's why I laugh at the guys that say, well, I'm doing the kata exactly the way Itosu did
This
it.
is
I'm doing
yeah.
the kata exactly the way this guy did it because you're probably not doing it the right.
Yeah, and even Toyama Kanken, Chibana
Yeah,
Shosin, they say they kept the kata how they have had learned it from Itosu
yeah,
Anko.
right,
Okay, yeah, maybe,
right,
yeah,
maybe, right,
yeah, I don't doubt it, yeah, but you have to add the point of time. Yeah,
Right.
you cannot say I do Itosu no kata 1, Itosu
Right.
no kata 2. You have to add always the point of time when you
Right.
have learned it, right?
Right.
And the next problem is um, you learn it, yeah, you learn the kata, yeah, and give it to your student. Your student give it to the next student, yeah, and by accident, yeah, they doing it. I won't say a wrong way, but another way. Okay.
So, so I walk into my dojo one time
Mm.
and someone's doing a move in Kusanko. And I walk and I stop and I look and I literally, my initial response is, what the hell is this guy doing? Right? It's one of my black belts. So I go over, I go, do that move section again. He does it. I go, what are you doing? That's not how it's done. He goes, oh, Sensei so and so showed me, one of my other senior black belts. I says, he showed you to do it like that? He goes, yeah. I said, all right. So now he comes down. I says, hey, do Kusanko. So he does Kusanko and he does this weird thing. I said, stop. I said, stop. Do that again. I said, what are you doing? I said, he goes, well, that's how you showed me. I said, listen, let's get one thing straight. I've never, ever in my entire karate life done it like that. Ever. And he's looking at me. He's like, no, no. He goes, no, no. I said, no.
Yeah, yeah.
I never showed you like that. I said, it's like this. And I corrected it, right? So what you're saying is 100% true. It's so easy. You begin to do something, you don't even realize you've changed it. It feels completely normal. Or you think, oh no, that's the way the teacher showed me. I'm telling you that's the way he showed me, right? And then the teacher walks in and says, I've never done it like that. That's not the way I showed you. I showed you like this. And then the guy's like, oh, really? I'm thinking, So yeah, I mean, again, that's why I don't think people like I study Chen style Taiji Chuan, and the form is very long and very complex, and the form's about 400 years old, right? And my Taiji master says right out, he goes, if you don't think there's been changes to this form in the 400 years, you're literally out of your mind. He said it's not possible within human nature and the way humans are that something hasn't changed.
The last thing I said was, or I wanted to say, you have to have records, yeah, of the katas, yeah, and even then you cannot be 100% sure, yeah, what's the correct movement, the correct timing, you don't know, yeah. The best example for this is Funakoshi Gichin, yeah. We are lucky to have records of him
Right,
from the 20s, 1920s
right,
and 1930s and 40s showing kata. Yeah,
right,
and then you can compare and see how has Funakoshi's karate kata evolved
right,
somehow. Yeah,
right.
or for the better or for the worse.
Right. I think he's a good
Doesn't have to
example,
worry.
especially because like I'll tell people because I have some Shotokan senior Shotokan people that train with me in other martial arts. And one of the things I say to them, I said, show me the photo of Gichin Funakoshi in a wide stance, in a deep stance. I said he's almost always in a natural stance, but I said, you look at modern Shotokan, you see these very deep stances. And so don't tell me, that people haven't changed stuff. I mean, this is why well, we're doing it
Yeah,
exactly like this
yeah,
guy.
yeah.
And I also find suspect people like that say, well, we're the true lineage of this, or we're the true lineage of that. Um, like you probably know from your research. I mean, these early guys, they were all getting together and comparing notes. I mean, they were all training together and they were trying to figure stuff out. Like I said, now karate's become Coke versus Pepsi. Well, my karate's better because I do Ishinru. Oh no, my karate's better because I do Goju, right? And it's Coke versus Pepsi, right? But if you really look at it, it should all be close to the same thing. If it's all karate, it should be done similar. And frankly, I think that's hurt it a little bit because what it does is it makes, I think, people sometimes change it to make it different from another style. So you see, oh, we do it like this instead of making it more looking at the principles, like how to move, what's the best way to move, right? As opposed to, well, my teacher said
Yeah,
this,
yeah, yeah.
you know.
To
Um,
change it to make it special.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Right. Ours is special for this reason.
Mm.
Um, like I think I tell people all the time, it's like this idea that there's one style is better than another style, or one style is deadlier than another style. It's just ridiculous because again, there's only dangerous people. And like as a police officer, I worked with police officers that never ever studied martial arts. And believe me, you didn't want to fight these guys. These guys were tough, tough guys. Okay. And so from that aspect too, I look at it and sometimes just shake my head. And I think it's what hurts karate, frankly. I think this us versus them kind of, and even me, like in my dojo, I'm not interested in beating Goju-Ryu or Shotokan. We train to, how is the criminal, how is the bad guy who's going to try to hurt us, how is he going to attack us? And how are we going to respond? And like I tell people, I never fought a criminal that knew karate.
Okay.
I fought a couple of criminals that were boxers, but I never fought a criminal that knew karate, right? Because I think if you're training in karate, I think in general, you're not going to be a criminal. I just think that the two don't necessarily go together. Of course, could it? Of course it could, right? But so like in my dojo, we're not training to fight another karate guy. We're training to fight the predators in society that are going to try to harm us. And I think probably if we looked at the early day, if we could go back in time and look at the early days of karate, I would think we probably would see a little bit more of that and a little bit less of, well, how are we going to defeat the guy from the karate school across the street?
Yeah. Yeah. And you always must not forget that karate became a business factor, right? Yeah, I think after the end of World War II, yeah, when Okinawan were very poor and GIs were willing to learn karate, and yeah, I think you told about the GIs paying for karate masters, or
Well,
even the army paid, right?
Tatsuo Shimabuku was
Yeah,
given a contract with the United States Marine Corps, with the United
Marine Corps,
States
right?
military. And he was paid, so this is in the 50s, he was paid $25 a month per Marine.
Yeah, right.
And at one point, I was told that they had to build a second dojo. He
Yeah,
had
and you
like
can understand well why
200,
they don't. Yeah,
200
sorry.
Marines,
Yeah,
200
wow.
Marines. Okay.
That's
Now,
pretty
if you
much
go
that.
back and look at the yen to the dollar
Mm,
back then, that's why Tatsuo was able to send my teacher, his son, to Tokyo University.
right,
So
right.
my
Yeah,
teacher studied at Tokyo University. And then what he did was he took the money when he got back and he invested it in real estate. So he owns real estate all over Okinawa. So he's a
that's pretty
millionaire.
smart.
And that's why like a lot of the Americans have trouble dealing with him because he speaks English and he's not dumb.
Hmm.
So like, and we know how it is. A lot of guys, all they're interested in is certificates, right? But again, he's not a dumb guy. He's not, and he doesn't need the money. He's a millionaire
Hmm.
from real estate. So he
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
need, he said to me one time, he said, Michael, karate is a bad business.
yeah. But back to the situation directly
Right.
after World War II, you can understand very well why
Oh,
masters wouldn't like to lose any of their students, right?
yeah.
So they have to be special. Yeah,
Right.
please stay with me and don't go to dojo A or B
Right.
or schools A or
Right.
B. So yeah, that's a situation we didn't have before
Right.
uh, uh, that. Yeah, when you think of Itosu Anko or Yabu Kentsu, yeah, they didn't do it for money. Yeah, yeah. Itosu Anko should have done it. Yeah,
Right.
when we take a look at his bad situation in his
Right.
later life. Yeah, but I think Yabu Kentsu was paid well. Yeah, being a teacher and the pension from the military as
Military.
well.
Right.
So
Well,
yeah, you can go to teacher A and B and C. Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah,
I think the interesting thing is those early guys also sent their guys.
yeah,
Said, hey, go,
right,
go,
right,
hey, this guy over here, he's doing this thing. Go,
right,
go, go learn that from him, right?
right. Yeah,
You know? Um, So I respect those guys for that, right? But yeah, I see now, like, and even now, you want to take it further into the modern age. Now, karate's even become a tourist attraction,
Yeah,
Okinawa.
definitely. Definitely, yeah. When I my first time Okinawa was 2000. Yeah, early 2000. I went to Okinawa for just 10 days. Yeah,
Right,
I was studying in Tokyo area, and I had time and wanted to see Okinawa, the birthplace of karate. uh, you had karate people, yeah, foreign karate
right,
people over there training, yeah,
right,
since yeah, since the 50s and 60s
right.
and so on. But it was not like now. Yeah,
No,
when you go there, you have the kaikan, you have the
right,
karate information office, you have your whole infrastructure.
right.
Yeah, and you see hundreds people groups coming in, yeah, and karate having become a tourism factor.
Well,
Absolutely.
it really start. I was at the opening of the Budokan, the Okinawa Budokan in '97.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I represented Master Shimabuku's dojo. I led the demonstration in '97, and
Wow.
I almost feel that that's where it kind of really began to go. Where okay, let's get as many international people over here. Let's invite them. Let's make them welcome,
Mm.
right? And then once they open the Kaikon, which I only when I was there last, it was still under construction. So I
Okay.
saw the outside of the building, but I'm going back. Hopefully this year or early next year, I'll be back in Okinawa. But uh, but yeah, it's amazing. I went in 1991 was the first time I went, right? And outside of Master Shimabuku's dojo at the time, right across the street, there was still a rice farm.
Mm.
And I went back in 94, and I think I went back in 94, went back in 97. And by 97, the island was going through already dramatic changes. Like I was shocked at how much had changed just from 91 to 97. And now when I go back, I mean, it's like, I didn't go one time for 10 years. And when I went back, I was like, oh my God, I don't even like this is so different, right? And
Absolutely. Yeah.
so
You have the monorail now.
yeah, you got
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
monorail. I mean, it's just amazing how things have changed there. And Master Shimabuku told me at one point on the main drag that goes through, he says at one point they were talking about putting a second level. So almost like a highway on top of it. So you'd have cars
Yeah.
driving underneath and cars driving on top, and maybe having them go in the opposite direction and be wider so they can have less traffic. So it's amazing. It's amazing what's going on there. And and tourism is a big thing. I mean, that's one of the main things of Okinawa is tourism. So I understand. Look, everybody has to earn a living, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And
So what would Yabu Kentsu and Itosu Anko say about Okinawa now and the development of karate?
yeah, they'd be shocked. I think they'd be shocked. I mean, I think anybody, you look at the martial arts in general, it's become so popular worldwide. And sadly, it's probably more popular in the West than it is in Japan and Okinawa. I think it's more popular here than it is over there. I mean, I know when I first went in 1991, when I was walking around, I saw a lot of dojo. There were a lot of dojo, and not just like bigger dojo. There were these very small, kind of intimate dojos, right? That might be attached to a house or whatever. And a lot of those you don't see anymore, right? And even some of the bigger dojos that I remember seeing and you're not seeing. So there's not as many as there once was, right? Um, and then the other thing I think too is I think you've got a kind of right now you've got a little bit of a split in karate, meaning you've got the people that are doing karate more as a sport, and then you've got the people that are doing karate more from a self-defense standpoint. And again, I think there's room for both. And I'm a believer in you do what you like. If it makes you happy to do karate as a sport, do it as a sport. But the people that do it as self-defense, I think there's room for that too. And one of the things, the problems I see on Okinawa is that's one of the aspects that I don't think they're paying a lot of attention to anymore. You're not seeing karate being practiced in Okinawa as an art of self-defense. It's almost everyone's doing it as a sport. And that's something I think at some point there's going to have to be kind of a some type of reckoning
Mm.
because again, look, you live in Germany, right? I live in the United States. Okay. Our societies are not built like Japan. Okay. Japan and Okinawa are ridiculously safe. All right. But in our societies, there are criminals we may have to deal with. There are situations where we may have to defend ourselves or save our families, right? That's just the way our society is, good or bad, right? Um, so I think that's why I think some of the Westerners, look at some of the Okinawans and say, okay, well, what about this? Well, what about that? And there's no answers. Like I attended a seminar with a 10th Dan from Shorin, and someone asked him to show the a fighting application for the last move in Nahanchi. And he showed a fighting application for the last move in Nahanchi, and the whole room was just silent. Like literally, like looking at this guy like, you're kidding me, right? Like you think that would work? Like that would never work in a million years. Like what kind of fighting technique is that? Like we're all looking at each other like, this is the fighting application for that move? And he must have realized, he read the room, so he showed a second application, which wasn't much better than the first, right? And again, so I think like in terms of Okinawa, I think it's fine if you want to go in that direction of sport, but I think you have to keep a little bit of that original intent. If you don't have some of that original intent, you lose it. It's hard to get it back. Like I said to Joe Swift, I said, when's the last time you saw a karate master demonstrate any ground fighting techniques? When's the last time you saw a karate master demonstrate a technique against someone armed with a knife? Specifically on Okinawa. The answer is I haven't really seen it. I can't remember the last time I saw it, right? But in my dojo, in my Ishinru class, we do ground fighting. We do work against knives, right? So I'm just saying it's interesting how the process that it's gone, right? And you see, like you say, like Itosu's karate, if we could have seen what his karate looked like in the mid 1800s, compared to his karate in the early 1900s, I think there would have been probably a difference, right? There would have been a pretty big difference,
I'm
right?
still hoping for a Tosu karate book to be unearthed or a video clip. Yeah, I don't believe
Yeah.
that's there's something that exists, but yeah, you can still hope, right?
Yeah, well,
In
yeah, you
some
can hope.
drawer, yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
never know.
anything, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
I
like the
mean,
Kian book.
like
Yeah,
the Keon book,
yeah,
right? I mean, again, like I look at the Keon book, like his little book on his the fighting techniques, right?
yeah,
I look at it and I'm like, yeah, look at this, right? These are not nice techniques. Like they're not interested in scoring a point. They're interested in and
yeah.
disabling an opponent, right? And like for my job, 22 years in law enforcement, you know, um, hundreds of life and death encounters, right? And I wasn't interested in scoring a point on a criminal. I was interested in stopping him, right? And getting him in handcuffs. Uh, so, I just think and hope that Okinawa is careful about going too far in one direction and completely losing karate's original identity. And again, I think like your two books show it, like like where there's this active discussions about, okay, well, we can't show the school kids to poke somebody in the eye. We
Mm.
can't show the school kids to do this type of thing because it's not going to go over, right? And like even in my own dojo, in the jujitsu kata, there's two kata where you disarm the guy with take his sword away from him, and you stab him in the base of the skull. So like we made a decision early on that okay, well we can't show kids that. You can't have a little kid stabbing another kid in the back of the neck with a sword. So we changed it to empty hand, where he just does a strike as opposed to stabbing, right? But in
Right.
the adult, you come in the adult class, and yeah, you'll see an adult do that because that's the historical context of what went, how the kata were created, which was they were created for war. They were created for life and death battle, you know. And even you see with some of the early went during that transition period, um, like with Keon in the Keon book, it's talked about that he trained people at his helm differently than he trained people at other locations.
Right.
And I know even Tatsuo, you know, there was one American who lived there for a while, Walter Van Gilson. Sadly, he passed away a couple of years ago. And he told me, he said, Mike, I attended some of the classes where there was only Okinawans there. And Tatsuo let me go to those classes. And he said, I'm telling you, he taught them different. He says, I saw things at those classes that I didn't see him teaching in the regular classes. And again, that's not a knock or whatever. It's just if it's a fact, it's a fact, right? So we don't know, right? What these guys might have been teaching to their more serious students. Maybe the more serious students, they were teaching a more serious version of karate and leaving the
Yeah.
school kids stuff, you know, for the school kids, you know.
Somehow where they were protecting their art, right?
Right. Right.
Um, if it's good or it's bad, we don't know. Yeah,
Right.
you have all the Okinawan masters who learned this protected style, and yeah, hopefully they pass it on to the next generation, and it's not lost, right?
So what I wanted to ask you too is like, so in Motobu, you know, it's always mentioned in some of the Motobu related stuff
Yeah.
that Yabu was the one guy he couldn't defeat. Like they engaged in training, sparring, whatever you want to talk about, and Motobu couldn't defeat him. In your research, did you hear any of these stories? Did you come across anything that where you heard mention of this?
So, interestingly, there are not so many stories about Yabu. Yeah, you have for Itosu Anko. Yeah, when
Okay.
you take my book, in the end of the Itosu book, there's a list of all this kind of stories I
Right.
collected. Right,
Right.
I think 30x
Right.
stories. Yeah, when you take a look at Yabu, there are not so many of these stories. Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah. Um, but there are a couple of stories, and one of these are the story you mentioned, the fight against Motobu Choki.
Right.
Yeah, and first time I found it in the literature was an article from the 1950s.
Okay.
Yeah, in a Japanese magazine by Kinjo Hiroshi, Gekkan Karate in the
Okay.
46 or 40, 56 or 57. And there was a Okinawan guy who wrote a couple of stories about Okinawan karate masters, and you find this story, the fight Motobu Yabu in it. Yeah, and I was wondering what is the source of this story?
Right.
Yeah, who is that guy who wrote the story? Yeah,
Right.
why did Kinjo Hiroshi go to that guy to ask for that story? And because of the name was written wrong in the article, yeah, we couldn't find more information about that author. But luckily, in the table of consent, you have the right spelling of the name, and we could track him down. And it was a kind of educator in Okinawa. Yeah, so he was around. He could have somehow heard about a
Right.
story of a
Right.
fight. Yeah,
Right.
um, so it could have happened.
Right.
Yeah, somehow. But the first time when we in the Western Hemisphere heard about this story was by Richard Kim, right?
Right.
In his book we
Right.
already talked about, and he totally pimped up the story. Yeah,
Right.
so
Right.
there's so many attendants, and even the
Right.
press was there.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I haven't seen any press reports. Yeah,
Right.
reporting. Have you? No,
No.
we haven't. Yeah,
Right.
no video, no,
No.
no photo. Yeah, so that I yeah concluded there might have been a fight, a training fight.
Right.
Yeah, um, and maybe one of them won, the other lost. Yeah, but when we are serious, they have fought maybe 100 times in their lifetime together.
Right.
They were friends.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
one time
Right.
Motubu won, one
Right.
time Yabu
Right.
won. Yeah,
Right.
but it's very good example for how such kind of story works, right? Are
Right.
working. Yeah,
Right.
there's an actual event, yeah, happening some point of time, and you have many people, yeah, who attended, heard about it, and yeah, the story grows and grows, and it finally goes to Richard Kim, and from Kim you have all the Western authors writing about Yabu was winning against Motubu, yeah, and yeah, that's how it works. But yeah, I think bottom line, I think that they fought or practiced together,
Right.
and but we don't know where, when,
Right.
and how it ended, right?
Well, I will say the fact that Yabu Kentsu went to war
Mm.
would change his mindset. Because I can tell you now, I've been in a lot of hand-to-hand combat, a lot, and it's dramatically changed my karate and it's changed my outlook, right? So what I mean by that is like, years ago, someone said to me, they said, "Hey, Mike, you don't you don't fight in tournaments," and I said, "No." And they said to me, "Well, how do you know your karate works?" So their instructor was sitting next to him, and the instructor started laughing. And so the guy looked at his teacher and said, "Well, what's so funny, Sensei?" And he goes, so he says, "Well, ask him, Mr. Calandra, again what you just asked him." And so I said, I looked at the guy and I said, "When was the last time you had a fight?" And the guy hesitated, and I said, "Let me guess, high school, right? You were in high school and you got into a fight with another kid, right?" He goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, three guys tried to kill me on a subway platform last week. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. The subway platform was 6 feet wide, and I'm fighting three guys." I said, "But I'm sitting here, right? I'm sitting here. I'm talking to you now. So that means they didn't win, right?" And I said, "So, don't misunderstand me. I'm not knocking that you like doing the sport sparring, that you want to go out there and mix it up with your fellow karate guy. For me, I can't get excited about that." And then the other thing is once you've engaged in that kind of thing, it's hard for you to turn off certain things.
Mm.
So I'm not interested. I don't want to hurt somebody in a sport context. I don't want my brain to kick into that other mode that I have. I don't want that to happen. And I could envision a guy like Yabu Kentsu coming back from war and it changing him in a way where he realizes now, well, yeah, I love karate. I want to do karate, but this idea of actual fighting, this idea of life and death combat is a pretty serious thing. I've experienced it firsthand, and maybe certain things don't get him as excited, or maybe certain things he's a little leery of about engaging in because maybe his brain kicks into that mode that he had to go into to survive in
Yeah,
war, you know?
totally.
So, that's why to me, he's a very fascinating guy. Because of the fact that he experienced that. And again, the thing that people don't understand is, um, he's experiencing war when you have firearms, but you don't have initially the type of firearms you have now,
Mm.
where war still can come down to close in combat with bayonet and knife and empty hand, right? You run out of bullets, you're engaging the enemy. So he engaged in a very different type of combat than, let's say, modern military guys engage in. That up close, and I'm not to say that our guys don't ever do that. Of course they do. But back then, it was more likely that at some point you're going to engage and you're going to be looking into your enemy's eyes when you're possibly having to take his life. And the fact that, people don't take a step back and look at that and realize that that had to 100% change this guy. Like
It was
that.
about life and death,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, and when you take a look at the battle he was participating in, I write about it. Luckily, we have some records that he attended that battle, a special battle in Korea, I guess it was. or in China, and yeah, they stormed this fort, right? Yeah, first off with guns, yeah, and then with bayonet and maybe
Right.
to hand combat. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And it was kind of difficult for me to put in words because I
Right.
was not involved in military actions in any way or
Right.
haven't read about it, researched it before. So this chapter took me quite a while to finish.
Yeah.
Yeah, even the consideration about what would have Yabu felt after the
Right.
war. Yeah, coming back. Yeah, I wrote about PTSD,
PTSD.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are no studies about PTSD from the Sino-Japanese War in the
No.
mid 1890s. Yeah, but for the Russia-Japanese War 10 years later, and yeah, would wonder me if Yabu would not have been affected by PTSD in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, you not only had the guns and the bayonets, but you also had the cannons from the ships firing all the time,
Right.
and it must stress him totally.
Well, from working with police officers that have been involved in shootings,
Yeah.
some of them, no problem. Like they engage in the shooting and they're able to handle it and deal with it and they're
Okay.
fine. And then, like one guy I know was in a shooting, life and death. He's 100% in the right. He didn't kill the person he shot, but he stopped the threat to save himself. Um, Big hulking guy, right? And he was so stressed out, it triggered MS. It triggered MS in his body. And uh, eventually had to leave the police department. They gave him a disability pension. Um, he just could not go back out on patrol. So, again, this is why I'm saying like a guy like Yabu, he seems to have handled it pretty well because he came back and he continued to function in society and function at a high level, meaning, he's in the
Yeah.
school system, he's doing things, he's doing, and so again, some guys are able to handle it. Like I'll give you something which you probably don't know about, but you'll find this interesting. So the New York City Police Department, we have what's called the heart bill. So if you, during your police career, when you go to retire, you always get your heart checked. So if you have a blockage in your heart or you have damage to your heart, you get a tax-free disability pension for the rest of your life. And
Okay.
people say, well, why do police officers get that? So one of my students, black belt, great shape. Guy's in phenomenal physical condition. He's getting ready to retire, and he says, yeah, he says, they're telling me I need to get my heart checked. I said, yeah, you got to get your heart checked. He goes, gets his heart checked. The doctor sees something on his test. He says, I want you to go to a cardiologist and go for a battery of tests. He says to me, I don't know if I'm going to go. I feel really good. I said, listen, if you don't go, I'm going to drag you. I'm going to drag you
Yeah.
to the heart doctor. So he goes, and sure enough, he has two blockages, and they have to put stents in.
Wow.
And he says to the heart doctor, he says, Doc, I don't understand. He says, I'm in really good shape. I watch what I eat. I exercise all the time. He says, how could this happen to my heart? And the doctor looked at him and said, what job do you think you've been doing for 20 years? The
Yeah.
stresses that you guys are under. So like me, then I did 22 years and I decide to retire, right? So I go to the heart doctor and they put me on the treadmill and I start with walking, I'm running and I max out, right? And they said it was funny, they go to me, what are your plans after retirement? I says, oh, I own a business. Oh, what kind of business? I says, oh, I own a martial arts school. And they started laughing, the two doctors. And I said, what's so funny? They go, oh, we get a lot of martial arts guys in here, but a lot of them are fat, right? So that's what they said. And
Okay.
I said, so I laughed. I says, yeah, well, I'm not one of those guys, right? So I went through the complete battery and I had no heart problems. And two of my other senior students in my dojo in New York also were longtime police officers. They have no heart problems. But I know a lot of other guys that when they went to get checked, yeah, they had blockages, they had heart damage from the stress. So just from the stories I'm telling you, see, everybody handles it differently.
Yeah.
And some people are able to handle it and some people aren't. That stress, they internalize it and it kind of starts to eat at them a little bit. And that's where we see certain guys with the PTSD and stuff. And some guys, I've met guys that were in war and talked to them and they told me how much they loved it. So
Okay.
then you get a guy who just thrives in that environment. I mean, he's a warrior through and through, and that's the environment he loves, and he has no stress. He thinks it's the greatest thing in the world. So it's
Okay.
interesting to see the different reactions and how different people react to the same type of stresses, you know?
Yeah, maybe Yabu was kind of that guy, kind of this kind of guy.
Yeah,
Somehow, when he was on his deathbed, yeah, you read the
I read
episode,
them.
yeah,
Right,
when he
right,
want
right,
to settle his horse and go
right,
to Manchuria for
right.
another uh,
And again,
war.
like it's some people might look at that and say, oh, but it's impressive in a way that this is his mentality, right?
Yeah,
He
yeah,
has that
and
warrior mentality. He has a warrior mentality, you know?
right, and it's not the mentality we think about karate practitioners in Okinawa, right? When you think about them, yeah, pacifists like Itosu, not fighting, yeah, maybe doing some Buddhism and
Right, right,
religious stuff. Yeah, that's the mind in many people, right?
right,
Funakoshi writing and training,
right,
only kata,
right,
and Yabu is totally different, right?
right,
Yeah,
right,
as I said before, he's a fighter. Yeah,
right,
and
right,
he tried to implement what he learned and experienced in war into his training, into
right,
training of the school kids. Yeah,
right,
when we see he introduced this kind of um, yeah, protectors, right?
right,
For
right,
training.
right,
Yeah,
right,
the pictures from the 1930s showing him training with a guy who wears protectors. Very interesting. Yeah, they don't stop like 3 centimeters before the head, but
right.
on do it right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I don't know if you're aware, but Tatsuo Shimobuku implemented that. There,
yeah. Maybe I don't know.
there's photos.
Yeah.
There's photos of the Marines in what looks like
Okay.
kendo armor.
Yeah,
And they're
maybe. Yeah,
engaging in
absolutely.
full
Yeah.
it's full contact. They're going. And I've spoken to some of them that did that, and they said the headpiece was
Yeah.
steel. The front of it was steel.
Oh, okay.
And they said even if you wore like a padded small glove, when you hit that, like they said, you
Wow.
felt it. You felt it in your hand.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
so again, I think Tatsuo is an interesting guy because like I pointed out to some of the Ishinru people because they don't think about it, but like the kata he created, Sun Tzu, has as much open hand techniques as it does closed fist.
Okay.
Where most of the other kata in Ishinru probably has a little bit more closed fist, but also in Tatsuo's version of Nahanshi, there's extra open hand techniques. He changed it back to open hand from the closed fist that you see everybody else in Shorin do. So he's an interesting guy and he also refused to do the Pinan kata.
Mm. Okay.
He never taught. He says, "I'm not. Those are created for school kids. I'm not teaching those." He only always taught Seisan as the first kata. So he's an interesting character. He had an interesting mindset, right? So when you look at him using the body armor for fighting, when you look at him with changing a lot of stuff back to open hand, he's just interesting what he was trying to do with his martial art. I always wonder, was he rebelling a little bit against taking out the Chinese influence and trying to put a little bit more of the Chinese influence back? And I know even my teacher, his son, has said to me on numerous occasions, he says, "Oh, Mike, you're like my father." He says, "Your karate is for self-defense only." He says, "That's what my father was like." He says, which I take as a very high compliment, right? But
Yeah.
it's just interesting because you don't know. Like I would have loved to be able to sit down and talk to him. And
Tell me.
and I know you feel the same
I'm all
way. I
in.
mean,
Yeah, I'm all
you know,
in.
you know, and that's why I'm so glad you've written these books, because it allows a guy like me to read and get a little bit more insight into these guys. Um, you know, and again, like you said, it's not just about the karate, it's about the overall picture. We need to look at the overall picture. I think we get hung up on the karate, karate, karate. Well, how did he do this kata? And you know, how did he do this? And how did he teach that? Right. But we're not going to really know how he necessarily did that, right? We're going to have different versions of that, right? Depending on who you talk to. But to see how, you know, the society was at the time, to see how this guy developed in society, his background, his upbringing, the outside forces that affected what he was doing, you know, I think it's an important thing to look at. And like I said to Joe, and I'll say to you too, like for a guy like me right now, I think it's almost like a golden age of karate research.
Yeah. When
I really do believe that. I look at you, I look at Motobu Naoki, Andreas, Pat McCarthy, Joe Swift. You know, it's just, it's to me, it's great. Like I'm like, oh my God, this is fantastic for me because I'll have another book, I'll have another article, I'll have this, I'll have that. Um, you know,
yeah.
and it's not just the hearsay stuff where, well, oh, I was told that this is what happened. Well, who told that guy? Well, I don't know who told that guy. And there's a place for that too, the legends and the stories. Look, I love them as much as everybody else does, but I also like a little bit more of the real, to get a real picture of what was going on and what
Yeah.
was causing things to develop the way it developed, you know?
I always tell the story when I started karate training when I was 15. Yeah, I had the autobiography of Funakoshi Gichin, right? Karate do Ichido, German translation, and it was fascinating.
Oh, it was
Yeah,
fantastic. I read it.
fantastic.
I loved it. Right.
Yeah, and what did we know about karate history and development at that point of time? Yeah, it was Funakoshi Gichin. Yeah, who take it,
Right.
who took karate from the secrecy. Yeah,
Right.
in Okinawa, brought it to Japan in 1922. Nobody knew about it before.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the start.
Right.
Yeah, of modern karate development. Yeah, it's totally not true, right?
Totally not
No,
true.
yeah, and year after year we learned more about karate history. Yeah, you have articles translated in all around the globe. You have new findings from the researchers in Okinawa, yeah, and so on. We can put together a better picture, yeah,
Yeah.
of how
Yeah.
karate developed, truly developed. And there are a couple of open questions we still are looking for looking forward to answer somehow. But it's a better picture than when I started
Oh,
karate,
much better.
right? Much
It's much
better.
better.
Yeah, yeah. Especially because of the researchers in Okinawa, right? They're
Right.
not karate guys, but
Right.
they are studied researchers. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
look at the one thing that was found, and they brought it to the Kaikon, and the Kaikon didn't want it. And then
What was
they
that?
brought it to the museum, and the
What was
museum
that?
jumped on it. I forget, but it was,
Yeah.
I think, I don't even know if it was maybe I don't remember which it was. It might have even been the Keon book.
I don't know about that.
Because I've heard a couple of stories about this where it was brought to the
Yeah,
Kaikon and they said, no, no, we're not interested. And then I think Motobu Naoki wrote about it. And then they
yeah.
brought it to the Okinawan Prefectural Museum and they jumped on it. They're like, yeah, we'll take that. And thank
Okay,
God because they preserved it, right?
okay,
Think the
yeah.
guy would have thrown it in the garbage, right? Whatever
Well,
document it was, right? But
yeah.
this is, oh, you know what it might have been? It might have been the list of the
I remember. Yeah, yeah,
demonstration,
yeah.
demonstration, I think it was the list of the demonstration. So that early
Was it
demonstration.
Budokan or
Yeah,
something like that?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember. That's right. Yeah. The only problem we have, the researchers in Okinawa, they only speak Japanese,
right,
and they publish in Japanese
right,
language.
right,
Yeah. You say research is only research when you have published it. Okay.
right,
Yeah. They do publish it.
right,
Yeah. But most of us cannot read.
No, we can't
Japanese.
read it. Right.
Yeah, so there must be someone to translate it into English or other
Right.
languages.
Right.
Yeah. Um, 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 when you have it in English, then the community can
Right. Right.
read it and use it and maybe take research to the next level.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a little problem we have. Yeah,
Right.
still. Yeah, Motobu Naoki does a great job. Yeah,
Right.
translating all the stuff and sharing with the community.
Now
It's
he
fantastic.
speaks English.
Yes, he does.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Maybe
Yeah,
maybe in the future I try to get him on. Try to get him on the podcast. It'd be
yeah,
great
yeah,
to have him on. So what's your future plans? What's next?
yeah.
A
What's next?
vacation? A vacation?
A vacation from research. It would be good. Yeah, there's so, as I said before, there are so many open issues, open questions. We have to answer somehow. Yeah, from the historical research point of view. But it for me, it's just a passion. Yeah,
Right. Right.
I don't do it full time.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I so I researched 6 years for 2 books.
Right.
Yeah, and now I need somehow a break. Yeah,
Yeah.
from writing books.
Right.
Yeah, the next biography should be the biography of Funakoshi Gichin, right?
Okay.
Very important character,
Right.
person in the historical development of karate. But as you have so much material, so many documents, records, books, articles written by himself, yeah,
Right.
it
Right.
will take you at least 5 years to finish a book, at least.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You even have to sit full time on it. Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes I write about it. You have to motivate yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Every day. Yeah. Things for training as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Today
Yeah.
it's hot. I don't go into
Yeah.
the dojo.
Right. Right.
You have
Right.
to motivate. Yeah. I just done my daily job, finished. Yeah. And now, yeah, go into the gym or on the sofa or write about Yabu. It's
Right.
so difficult, and you
Right.
sit in a bubble. Yeah, you are
Yeah.
on your own. Yeah,
Right.
you have colleagues, you can exchange with them, but
Right.
still you are on your own. Yeah,
Right.
finishing the book, and you have
Right.
to decide. Do I need to answer that question and that question, or will I now finish my research and publish a book? Yeah,
Right.
without answering the open questions. So that was the thing I decided for the Yabu book after 3 years. Yeah, there are a couple of open issues, but I said no. I must publish it
Right.
now.
Right.
Okay, so Funakoshi Gichin would be a fantastic project, but not in the near future for me. Yeah,
Right.
hopefully there's a guy, yeah, who looks, watches this interview and says, okay, I go for it. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, you have my support.
You know,
Um,
you have so many guys. I mean, Kenwa Mabuni, I think, is an interesting guy.
yeah,
I mean, he's a very interesting guy. He was a
he
police
is
officer, and
Motobu Choki.
Motobu Choki. I mean, look, we have the books that Motobu wrote, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
we read, right? That I think are fantastic. But actually, I was thinking about this last night when I was thinking about coming out here to talk to you. I said, it's funny. We know so much about Motobu, but no one's done a biography on him, like an in-depth biography. And the thing is there's good family history there. You have Motobu
yeah,
Naoki, you have
yeah,
so it's not like there's a lot of photos of him. There's a lot of things in writing about him. Even there's stuff on the mainland that was written
yeah,
about him, like the famous fight with the Russian European strongman boxer guy, whatever he was, right? I mean, there was an article written on that, right? So yeah, he's a fascinating guy. I mean, so he's
yeah.
another one. You know,
Absolutely, yeah, and don't forget the compilation by Patrick McCarthy about Motobu,
right,
yeah, the
right,
book he
right,
wrote. Yeah,
right.
so there is something you can start with.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%. 100%.
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of more Shibana Choshin from the younger generation.
Right.
There's a book being prepared about Toyama Kanken. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Hopefully it will be finished soon. Biography. But
I think was it Joe that told me someone's writing a biography on Chitose?
yeah, James
Yeah,
Hedge is
yeah,
writing
yeah.
about
Because
his
Joe suggested I
experience.
have him on to talk about that.
Yeah, yeah,
I want to, again, it's not, I'm not like Joe Rogan. I don't have this massive audience, but compared to other martial arts channels, I have there's a decent amount of people that follow the channel. And I said to Joe and everybody else, I want to try to promote you guys so people know
yeah.
about these books and know about the research and it gets out there. Um, you
Very
know,
grateful.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's great. I mean, and I'm having fun, right? Like I never thought I'd be interviewing people. I mean, I'm a karate guy, right? I was a police officer and a karate guy, right? You know,
yeah, yeah. And doing great job.
well,
Fantastic. Thumbs up.
it's
Yeah.
funny. A couple of my early black belt students are in media, right? And
Okay. Yeah.
they were young when I
Like
trained them.
me.
Then they went off to college, and they said to me, they said to their mother, they says, we watched Sensei doing a podcast, like. He's good at that. Like he's,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
well, again, but it's the same thing. Like when I first started, if I watch one of the early ones, I get very aggravated with myself, right? So I'm trying to improve too as I do it, right? I'm trying to watch certain things and learn as I go along also.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting process,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm in public relations as well.
Okay.
I'm the one preparing clients for doing interviews.
Oh, okay.
So I
Okay.
never thought about doing interviews myself.
Right. Right.
So yeah, but back to my projects. Yeah, you asked me about projects.
Right.
So it is not Funakoshi Gichin, it's not Mabuni Kema or the other
Okay.
guys. I thought about doing academic research on the Itosu letters. Okay,
Okay.
the 1908 letter by Itosu Anko. Yeah, there's a
Okay.
couple of research out there. Yeah, and I will looking forward to build on it, and yeah, doing academic article or little book. Yeah, but haven't started.
Would that include like the precepts that he talks
Yeah,
about?
the letter is a
Yeah.
precept, so it's identical. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I always say a letter.
Right.
Yeah, because we called it precepts. Yeah,
Right.
no one else did, but it's just the letter by Itosu Anko, right? Yeah, translation and analysis of the content. We have a couple of approaches from Okinawa. They did a very good investigation on it, and in Hungarian language, there's
Okay.
an academic article,
Okay.
very well written by a researcher from Hungary. Yeah,
Okay.
so I put it all together. That's one of my ideas, yeah, for a project. At the moment, I'm putting together a bibliography of Funakoshi Gichin.
Okay.
Yeah, so Funakoshi Gichin is the karate master who published the most articles and books
Right.
about karate, yeah, from that generation. Yeah, you have 5 books, more than 30 articles. Yeah, Patrick McCarthy is going to compile it in one book, some of these articles.
Yeah,
But
I think he's updating the book he did
yeah,
on from the
yeah,
coach.
yeah, Tanpenshu,
Tom Peshu. I
Tanpenshu.
think he's updating it. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Tenpenshu, and I'm preparing a complete list of all of Funakoshi's publications.
Okay.
And one project I want to do is then as a book, but we're looking to a future, right?
Future. Right.
Um, you know, during World War II, Battle of Okinawa, much had been destroyed. Yeah, books, photographs, notes, lives, and buildings. Everything had been destroyed, and here and there we are going to find a new photo, a new book. Kian, for
Right.
example.
Right.
But I think there's not much left in Okinawa. Yeah, we know of most of the cultural objects,
Right.
in regard to karate. Yeah, we have to take a look into the Okinawan overseas communities. Yeah, like
South America.
yeah, like Charles Gooden did for
Right.
Hawaii,
Right.
right, a couple of years ago. He unearthed some pictures, information
Right.
about early karate activities in
Right.
Hawaii before Yabu
Right.
got there, right? But you don't only have Hawaii, but you have California, you
Right.
have South America, you have
Right.
the Philippines,
Right.
yeah, all with Okinawan overseas communities,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And they, before they traveled to overseas, they studied with Itosu and Yabu at school,
Right.
yeah, as a school
Right.
kid, yeah,
Right.
not for becoming karate masters, yeah,
Right. Right.
but they had notes, records, school pictures, yeah, and all that. And maybe there's
Something there.
something there we can use, yeah, to improve our karate research in Okinawa.
Right.
Yeah, that's idea to take a look, a deeper look into these overseas communities. Yeah,
Yeah.
it would
I
be
think.
a 3 years project at least.
All right. I think there's probably something there. Joe Swift mentioned this also, and yeah, I mean, you look, Hohenzollern was in
Yeah,
South
for
America,
example.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And then when he came back to Okinawa, it was a bit of a, because again, he's doing karate a little different, right?
yeah,
Right. And they're
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
wait a second, whoa, this karate, wow,
Right.
this guy moves a little different, right? Why does he move like this, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's interesting that, yeah, something can go someplace and it's almost like it's in a time capsule, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good title for the book.
Yeah.
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 So-
I mean, it's
Absolutely. Yeah. So you have Hohenzollern, but I'm thinking of uh, people who emigrated there before him. Yeah.
right.
So
Right.
he was in the 30s, something
Yeah.
around,
Yeah. Something
yeah,
like that.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
must be 1910, around that time frame.
You
Yeah.
know,
And when
yeah.
you take a look at Japanese language newspapers in South America, yeah, you feel traces about karate there.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So written as the old style karate, yeah, the Chinese hand, not the empty hand.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, you must yeah, contact the families, yeah, of the first immigrants in South America, yeah, to find something out more.
So like even a little bit in Ishinru, I mean, like I said before, we've been told that Tatsuo spent time in the Philippines,
Yeah,
working in the
correct.
Philippines, right?
Yeah,
So again, who knows? I mean, yeah, there could be stuff there too. I mean, it's just it's crazy how the different directions
yeah,
this can go.
yeah.
But
I forgot to name the overseas community of Okinawan people in Japan as well.
right.
Yeah, you have many Okinawans went up to Kyushu or another place in mainland Japan. Yeah, and yeah, the Okinawan researchers did find something karate related there before. So
So even I asked Kichiro Shimabuku where they were during the war.
hmm,
Now, again, the romanticized version is that the Japanese military sought out Tatsuo because his karate was so strong, and if you teach us karate, you won't have to join the military. And then when I asked Kichiro, he goes, "No, no, we were on Kyushu." He goes, "We were on Kyushu for the whole war." And I said, "Well, how'd you get there?" He says, "We went by boat." He says, "My father put us all on a boat, and we went by boat to Kyushu. He felt we'd be safer there." And he said, my father worked in Kyushu and we stayed. I said, well, when did you come back to Okinawa? He says, when the war was over. So, this is a conversation we just had at dinner. And, I had to laugh because I said, well, that's not what everybody thinks. Everybody thinks this very romantic version, right, of the story, right? But yeah, and he also mentioned that, and I mentioned this to Joe Swift, that he said a lot of people attempted to make that voyage from Okinawa to Kyushu, and a lot of them were sunk. So he said many people never made it. They died on the voyage. He said his exact quote was, "We were lucky." That's what Kichido Sensei said to me. He said, "We were lucky. We made it, Mike." And then we came back. Um, so yeah, again, a simple question at dinner gives me an answer that nobody else had heard.
But you have to ask it,
Right.
right?
Have to ask the
Yeah,
questions.
and
Right.
it's very plausible. Yeah.
Right.
How old was Tatsu in the middle of the war?
Well, he died in 75. He was 68 or 69. So in the
You
war, so he's mid 30s, maybe
okay?
late 30s. So he's not that young, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Okay.
you know, so like that's why when I go to Okinawa, one of the things I want to do is I want to sit down and do a serious interview with his son. I want to ask him and he, and I want to ask him a lot of questions. Now, maybe he doesn't know the answer to certain questions, but I want to ask him a lot of questions and
Absolutely. You
see what
have
he
to
has.
ask. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as a researcher, I'm always very pushy, right?
Right. Right.
Ask questions 10, 20,
Well,
30. Yeah. People are getting
well,
annoyed. Yeah.
it's funny
But
in my training, I ask questions. Like in other words, in
yeah.
Japan especially, that's frowned upon, right? Well, you
Yeah.
should just train, right? No, no, no. I will harass the teacher till he
Yeah.
explains it to me that where I understand it, right? Um, luckily Okinawa is a little mellower in that regard. But again, I don't care. I say to myself, well, if I'm flying all the way over here to train, I want to make sure I'm clear on the information they're teaching me so that when I go back, I understand it, right? Not that I think this is what it is, right? And it's the same thing. Like, I asked Tatsuo's son-in-law, Angiwezu, some questions at a breakfast. And some of his senior guys were sitting at the table and they were stunned by some of the answers. And they're looking at me like, right, because they never asked the question, right? And
Yeah, yeah, it's
you
always
know,
difficult in Okinawa.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
but you have to, yeah, and you won't get an answer, but you at least tried.
yeah,
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 and it's so important.
yeah,
Yeah,
you know,
and a fellow researcher went 3 times to Okinawa. First time he was sent away. Second
right,
time, the third time, yeah, always with sake
right,
coming there to his interview partners. And the third time he was successful. He
right,
was getting answers.
right,
Yeah, it's not always easy. Yeah, to go to Okinawa and stay there for a couple of times. Yeah, and get to the bottom of the question.
right,
Yeah,
right,
one story is I try to get much from the Yabu family for the book.
right,
Yeah, uh, I talked to the family in California, United States, and in Japan. Yeah, I was there in Japan, Okinawa, one time, only half an hour. Yeah, got back, and the second time for 2 hours, and that was not enough. Yeah,
right,
by any means. Yeah, you had to stay for months, yeah,
right,
and
right,
interview them every day, yeah,
right,
for a couple of hours. And when I've published my book, yeah, I went back to Okinawa this summer
right,
and visited the Yabu family again, yeah, just to say thank you again,
right.
and here's my book. And we sat again for 2 hours, and I learned new things I've
More
never
stuff,
heard before.
right?
Yeah, yeah, and so that's a good example.
Well, too, what I think sometimes part of the problem is like you say you're writing a book and people get interviewed and they get excited and then the person never finishes the project.
It happens.
But
It
in this
happens.
case, but now you finish the project, right? So now
Mm.
the family sees, oh wow, oh this guy actually did what he said he was going to do. And I think that goes a long way to making people say, "Oh, wow." And then they open up a
Yeah,
little bit more and they'll talk to you more then because, oh, look, he did it. He did this thing that he said he was
right.
going to do.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
think that helps. And I think that could help you with future projects now. Now you have two books, right? So now it's not like they're not a theory. They're done. They're there. They're printed. You can read them, right? And now, people say, oh, look, he did these books on these guys, and now he's doing a book on this guy. Oh yeah, let's help him out. This will be good. So I think it'll probably help you down the road in terms of doing your research.
Yeah, yeah,
You know?
I think so. I think so as well. But I think I have to stop my daily job, just starting research, but nobody's going to pay for it. So yeah, and I'm not affiliated with any university.
Right.
No scholarship. So other people have to do it. And as Joe Swift told me in Tokyo when I met in the summer, at least I put all the information I have together in the book, yeah, so that other guys, yeah, can start from there.
Right.
It's an important step, right, to write down the Yabu history and get information and stories from people still alive, right? Yeah. Um,
So do you know who Oscar Ratty is?
Pardon?
Oscar Ratty.
Yeah, yeah, I heard about the
Okay,
name.
so he wrote Secrets of the Samurai, which is
Yeah.
one of the early works on martial arts. Okay, so I was a friend of his.
Okay.
So I have one of his paintings. I have one of his drawings right here in my office. It's a drawing of me actually throwing somebody. He came to my
Okay.
dojo a bunch of times. We used to go out to lunch or breakfast once a month in Manhattan. Fascinating guy. But he realized this is obviously 30 years after he wrote Secrets of the Samurai. He says, Michael, now I realize there's a lot of mistakes in the book. And he said to me, he says, but I'm working, what did I have? I can only work with what I had available at the time, right?
Right.
He says, but I hope someday someone takes it forward, like someone now either revises that work or writes new works that are more correct and more in depth. So, here's a guy that wrote one of the earliest books, right? That would be considered like a historical thing of all these various subjects within martial arts. And, he's realizing years later that there's more. Now I know now. So hopefully it continues. And that's why I think it's great right now that we're seeing that. We're seeing guys that, like me and you, originally read Richard Kim's book, got excited, but now we're older and we look at it with a different eye and we're like, okay, wait a second, right? There's got to be
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Yeah.
This can't be this. Maybe this isn't. This seems like it's kind of, and now you've done it with two of them, right? And it's great. And Joe
Yeah.
did it with his Itosu book, and there's other books in the pipeline. I spoke to Walt Young. He's talking about a book. So again, I just think it's great. And like I said, I want to push it. So I'll put links to the books in the description. And I really appreciate you coming on. I hope we do this again. Even if you do your little pamphlet on the Itosu letters, come on and talk about it, and we'll talk about it and go through them. I think it's great. So I really want to say thanks, and I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for inviting me.
Hope you found that interview interesting. I mean, I know I really enjoyed talking to Thomas Feldman, especially with about the research and everything he had to do to accomplish these books, what his plans are for the future. Hopefully, we look forward to many more articles, books from Mr. Feldman. Again, I think we're in a golden age of karate research. Okay, but that research has to be founded on facts, not on hearsay. Something to keep in mind. All right. Again, if you liked it, please like, subscribe, consider becoming a member. All right. If you're not a subscriber, this is the first time you're seeing it, please become a subscriber. All right. And we'll plan on interviewing more people over the next few weeks, and we'll have some other interesting podcasts coming up, including, I think I may do a live podcast where you can ask questions and I'll respond to them live. And so I'm thinking about doing that. All right. So again, I appreciate you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.